Financing for movies, has traditionally come from studios. That's where it started. You had rich mogul types who owned their companies and financed their movies through their own fortunes or misfortunes. And my career has been fueled mostly by studio movies.
The difference between working with a studio and working independently is mostly that there's more money, there's somebody to pay the bills. So if the studios say yes, you've kind of gone to the one-stop shopping, because the studio can pay for the script and then they can help you with budgeting and doing all the things you need to do to make sure your project is feasible. And then they can distribute the movie. If you're making a picture independently, you have to put all those pieces together. That's the biggest difference. The producer has a much bigger job in independent movie making because it's just the producer dealing and assembling all the separate parts. It's kind of as if you had to go out and buy all the separate Lego pieces at different stores as opposed to going to one store that sold you a kit.
Back in the days when the spec market was really on fire, meaning that a writer would write something speculatively and then agents would kind of parcel out the script to different producers. Studios at that time realized that they needed to get all the scripts, and there was a lot of competition for that, and that producers were the key into it. And so they started making these first look deals with producers to bring them material. And basically what the deal is that whatever material you get, whether it's your own idea that you generate yourself or it's a piece of speculative material that you're given, you are obligated to show it to your studio, your home studio first. And in return, they generally pay your overhead and sometimes your salary against your fees once you make a movie for them.
We have our first look deal at Paramount Pictures. So they have the right to everything that we develop here at Platinum Dunes. So any project that we are looking into making, we bring it to Paramount first, and they have the option to decide whether or not they want to buy the script or make the movie or not. If they pass on it, then we're able to go and take it to the other studios, but our first stop is always Paramount.
So there's still the studio model. There's the independent model, where you finance a movie through a combination of foreign sales. And that's very big right now, is that you go and you take a movie and you have a cast and a director and you take it to a foreign sales company and they say, we can pre-sell your movie to the foreign markets for $10 million. Then you can take that $10 million commitment, you go to the bank, you finance it for $7 million. And then you have to find another $7 or $8 million to make your movie. And you either go to a studio, a US distributor, and you say, would you like this movie and what would you give me for it in advance of making the movie?
A distribution deal is very useful for a production and getting any production off the ground, because at the end of the day, it's all about distribution. We are a production company and a sales company, meaning that we sell distribution rights to films around the world. And sometimes we pre-sell those rights in order to finance those films. So it may be that we have to pre-sell certain territories or even North America in order to get the movie made.
For me, that's the most, a distribution deal is the most important part of making a project. I can access money to help me pay for the project. Generally speaking, they want to make sure there's some elements of distribution in place before they put the money in. Lots of projects are made and then can't get distribution. So distribution is really the way to get the money back, and the more distribution you can lock in, the more secure, generally speaking, the investors and financiers will feel. It's always a balance, because sometimes you can pre-sell rights or pre-license rights for distribution that ultimately may turn out to be worth more when you're done. So there's a balance to taking in safety versus giving away too much upside.
Even the least expensive movie costs a lot of money. So what you're looking for ultimately is, for most people, is theatrical distribution, and then sequentially through other markets, through video, online, pay TV, television, etc. And you need a distributor to handle that, since there's huge physical costs, there's huge marketing costs in theatrical, there's huge labor costs in things like DVDs or Blu-rays. So, and there's buyers are remote in terms of television and international. So whether it's an independent distributor, it's a studio deal, at some points you have to have an alignment of somebody who's come on board to take on the movie and release it, market and distribute it to theaters and all the subsequent markets. The greenlighting of a movie, again, two broad strokes, is one's through a studio, one's independently. If it's through a studio, then usually earlier in the process, you'll sell the rights to the studio. The studio really subsumes a lot of the producer responsibilities, and that you're going to them for approvals on the director, on the script, getting their notes, getting their input. They set the budget, you don't set the budget. They set the release date. So everything is then under somebody's control. Or you can go independently, in which case the producer retains more autonomy, and you're dealing with investors more than you are a studio. Then the job is to find something, usually when the script is finished and there's cast and director on the picture, then selling the distribution rights to an independent or studio, either independent distributor or studio. But you've made the movie, or you're making the movie you want to make, more than you're making a movie that the studio wants to make.
To get a movie greenlit, it's a number of things. Primarily, there are probably 3 or 4 main criteria that the studio is looking for in order to get a movie greenlit. The first is that the script has to be acceptable to them and acceptable to us. The second is that the budget has to fit into the box that they're looking for us to make the movie for them for. The third is casting, and the fourth is the director. So if you can check all those boxes to the studio's liking, then there's fairly a good shot that the movie will be greenlit.
It's almost impossible to get a studio to greenlight a movie. You have to package your movies. You have to walk in and make it impossible for them to say no. So it's very important that you walk in with a movie star that is bankable at the box office. And your script has to be good. You can't walk in and say, oh, we're working on it still. Oh, we're gonna fix the third act. It's gotta be fixed. You gotta walk in and know that your script's gonna be one of 20 that they're gonna be reading over the weekend, that they have to decide if they're gonna get their guys to invest $50 million in. So you've gotta really walk in with a good piece of material that has been developed and rewritten many times, preferably that's packaged. Not always, but preferably.
The things that a producer needs to get a picture made by a studio are an approved script, an approved cast, an approved budget, and an approved director. If you have those 4 things, you're pretty much ready to go.
The number of days that it takes to make a movie is something that the studio has a really low number inside their heads, and typically we would have a very high number inside of our heads. I always try to very quickly reach what I think is a realistic number in doing that, and the studio will still try to make it for less. And usually we will end up, because the studio has that power, end up at their number, and then we'll have to find ways to save money so that by the time we're finished, we're probably closer to our number, but for the same price that they wanted it at. So we might be 6 days longer or 7 days longer, but we knew it was going to take that time.
During the course of a movie, producers have different responsibilities. It depends on the movie. There's some movies where I am there every day. There's some movies that I come and go. Every movie has a different demand. And I'm running a company also, so we'll have 2 or 3 things going at once and 20 development projects. So I'm constantly sort of generally running back to say, okay, well, we're shooting, it's lunchtime now, all right, I gotta go focus on other things that are going on.
I love the field. You know, I love being out there, and all our shows are somewhere. We have a Pitbulls and Proleases in New Orleans. We're shooting Wahlburgers and Breaking Boston in Boston. We have Lockup in 3 cities, you know, New Jersey, I think we're in Michigan right now, and in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I make sure that I get out there. It's really tough to produce a show sitting in, you know, Studio City, California. You have to be out there. It's really good for the subject matter to understand it, you know. It's really great for the crew so they can feel like, hey, you know, I'm out there with them. It gives me perspective, and it really grounds me back to the whole reason I got involved in this business is I love telling stories, I love meeting people, I love experiencing new cultures, new people, new places, and that's the key. I make sure on every project that I do get out there for as much as I can.
From the beginning, the most important part to me is the planning part of the process. So that could be the development of the script. We'll work very closely giving notes, and then we'll work together in terms of hiring the crew, figuring out the location, all the essential things. By the time that movie starts, it's so well planned and storyboarded that we are always on the same page. Production sort of becomes its own animal. Rarely am I actually on the set just because I'm running a company.
Well, having run 2 movie studios and having worked with a lot of producers, I was always completely baffled when producers weren't on the set. I mean, it's you work so hard to get your movie to production. I could never understand when a producer would just kind of package a piece of material and let somebody else work on it. So I'm there every day. It was important to me to really try to contribute every day and try to do the best I could in terms of, you know, working with the filmmakers, working with the writers, working with the directors, and being there to make sure that the vision that the director or the actor, for that matter, you know, was trying to accomplish from the beginning, trying to make sure that that's taken to fruition.
When producing a movie, the main things that I keep in mind: am I servicing my story? Am I really telling the best version of that page that I'm shooting that day, or those pages that I'm shooting? Is it the most entertaining? Is it the most emotional? Is it the scariest? Whatever the pages call for, that day that I'm shooting those pages, am I maximizing it? Am I getting the best performance? Is the DP, the cinematographer, able to really give me the best look for that particular scene? So it's always maximizing what you're shooting that day.
I am a very involved producer. I think that it's the job of the producer who gives birth to the project and lives with it for perhaps many years before it goes to a director. Once you bring in a director, you have to forge that partnership. I don't want surprises on my set. I want to know everything that the director is going to shoot. I want to feel that I'm participating with him. And if I don't have a director that's collaborative, I don't want to work with him.
When Platinum Dunes makes a movie, there's only 3 of us here. It's myself, Michael Bay, and Andrew Form. And for every film that we've ever made, one of us or both of us have been on set from call to wrap every single day. That's just the way that we do it. Not every producer does it that way. And frankly, one of the reasons that we do it that way is because my partner Drew and I feel that Michael Bay can be partnered with whoever he wants. And one of the reasons that I think he stays partnered with us is because he knows how important it is to us. And Michael's a detail-oriented guy. And if he's going to call me one night and say, in the script that character's wearing red shoes, why do you have them in blue shoes? I better have been on the set to answer the question of why we changed the color of shoes. And the only way I can do that is if I'm there for every minute of everything that we do.
So working with a director, I like to be a brother to that particular man or woman, whoever is directing the film. And we will have a give and a take throughout the entire process, all the way from the final drafts of the script through the performance of the actors on the set, and all the work that the crew does, like a costume designer or a production designer or the cinematographer, the way a scene is lit. We go through all those decisions together. I sit back and watch at the monitor, and the director will often come when he or she is happy with what they have. They'll come and say, what do you think? Did I miss anything? Is there something more that we could do? And we'll have a little conversation. Maybe we'll try a few more takes.
Well, of course I view the dailies partly out of eagerness. It's like when you give birth to an actual child, you sure want to see that child. And as a producer who always initiated and accepted all the projects I did, I'm eager to see dailies. It allows me, basically, to sit with the director and privately, only privately after, talk to him or her about what I feel if an actor is too over the top, or if something isn't clear, or whatever it is.
You know, in thinking about the environment that I work in, it's a really simple thing. I just work by the golden rule. I try to treat people like I'd like to be treated. And I find that if I do that, and if I keep the human factor in mind, things tend to go really well. You know, there are a lot of, making a movie is really hard. Making a good movie is almost impossible. Think how you know, when people decide to make those lousy movies that are in the theaters, they set out to make a great movie. They didn't look at a pile of 10 scripts and go, let's make the worst one, right? They took the best one they had, they hired the best people they could to work on it. It's just hard. So, as a result, because it's so hard, nerves get frayed and people go, we've got everything's for the movie, and people may have to suffer, but the movie has to win. It's true that the movie has to win, but it should be, I find that you get more from people and have a better time working with people if you can create a kind of common sense of mission. People are in the film business because they love films by and large. That is my experience over 25 years, is that the reason that people went into this, it's hard. You can make a lot more money doing other things. You can work a lot fewer hours with a lot less certainty.
The next process is the post-production process, the editing process. And that's, for me, one of my great rest periods during a movie, which is the first 8 or 10 weeks when the director is doing his or her cut of the film. I try to give complete creative autonomy to that, and then before a studio sees it, I'll see it. I'll have a set of notes. What we can make a little shorter, what we can make a little longer, do we need to go reshoot anything? What music would be better in this? I remember a particular performance that maybe the director didn't include. Let's try it with that performance and see how it changes the scene. We'll go through days of notes and things like that, and then the director and the editor will work together to keep shaping that picture, and then finally we'll put it together with an audience and the studio, let studio see it with an audience. Hopefully we make films that make people laugh and cry. It's better to see it with an audience than in a cold room with just 6 people watching it.
You're testing the movie to see how the movie's playing to an audience. You're doing the music. You're just trying to make the best version of the movie possible.
I think every time I make a movie, editing brings a jolt of life into that production. Every time, because you really have this canvas and it comes together, sometimes very slowly. I've seen first cuts of movies, even the first few cuts of Glengarry Glen Ross, where it's just like, oh my goodness, what do we have here? We're all petrified, and you just keep working and working it, and to bring out the essence of the movie.
A great editor is best when you don't notice the editing. So if you go through a film and you don't see any jarring cuts or you don't see anything that bothers you, the editor has done a good job. The editor can take the best material you've shot and condense it from hours and hours to an average running time of 92 or 94 minutes and make it so that the best scenes that are shot are put into the movie in a way that makes the people who see the movie enjoy the movie.
An editor can make a very good movie great, and it's almost like it's a rewriting process again. So an editor is probably one of the most valuable people in making a movie. They can make you feel things, they can pump up jokes, they can make you more scared, they can make you feel. An editor is a critical, probably the most, oftentimes editors are called the second writers on, and oftentimes they are. And they can really reshape a picture in a good way.
Editing time to me is enormously valuable because you have a whole new crack at helping modifying your film at very little ongoing weekly cost. When you're shooting, each day is costing a ton, and the immediate preparation is quite expensive. In editing, sometimes it pays to say, let's stop, go away for a week, and look at it again, and have new ideas and really modify a picture. The famous great old director, George Stevens, great director, he personally told me, as a director, he felt he had 3 cracks at each film. First crack, scripting stage. Second crack, while directing. Third crack, he said, a whole new crack at it in post-production. editing.
People often say that a movie is created 3 times. It's created in the script, it's created in the filming of it, and it's created again when you edit the movie.
It's one thing to watch a scene play out in front of you, and it's another to see how the camera captures it. I've been in situations where I was sure that a scene sucked and that the actors were not doing a good job, and then I look back at the dailies or go into the edit room and see a cut of the scene, and all the things that concerned me didn't exist in the cut. Inversely, I've seen scenes where I thought it was great and it's cut together and it's awful.
I think that over time, preview screenings can help. It's having someone smart enough to interpret the results of the preview screenings to see what changes could be made to the movie and whether those changes are worth the cost to make the changes. It's really the interpretation of the preview screenings, I think, that's the most important thing.
Well, a preview screening is really valuable for producers and studios and directors because it tells you kind of where the audience is engaged and where they get antsy and where they're not engaged, or where the joke is working or where the joke isn't working, or where the scare is working or where the scare isn't working, or where you want them to cry or where you don't want them to cry. So it's a very valuable tool, but you can't be a slave to it either. You have to kind of sit in the audience. All my preview screenings, I sit with the audience. I sit right in the middle of the theater so I can feel around me where they're engaged and where they're not engaged. And what it helps you do is to fine-tune your movie to make sure that when you release it, you know, you really tested it so that the audience enjoys it to its maximum capacity.
I think preview screenings are essential because sometimes we all get too close to the product itself, and it's really nice to be able to bring in an audience and see. And sometimes I'll use a preview audience to really get my point across. Maybe I'm wrong, but you know, directors often get too close to the material to be able to tell. We had a film called The Signal, and the middle section of the movie just went on for too long. It was great, but it just went on for too long, and I thought we were going to lose the audience, and I could not convince. This movie happened to have 3 directors, but each director directed a different segment, and I could not convince the director who directed the middle segment to cut it down until we did a preview screening, and unanimously everybody there said, you know, the movie's great, cut it down. And the movie ended up getting into Sundance, and the movie ended up doing tremendously well at Sundance. It sold for literally 90 times its budget. So.